Thank you guys for coming down. I want to start out a little bit before we kind of get introductions. I want to know a little more about you guys. I actually recognize a bunch of you in the audience. So who here is actually a developer? Who here is Yeah, Louie, put your hand down. Who here has actually developed a Twitter app? Okay, so you guys are fairly familiar, not a ton of new stuff. Great. So the topic today is kind of opening up opportunity with Twitter. We'll get into what that means a little bit, but first I thought we'd go over just some really quick intros. I'm Ryan Sarver, and I'm on the platform team at Twitter.
I'm Rafi Krikorian. I'm one of the engineers on the platform team.
And we just threw up some hashtags if people wanted to talk about the session and chide us or back channel us. You can do whatever you want. Today I just want to really quickly talk a little bit about the philosophy we had behind the Twitter API, a little bit of the history, talk a little bit about our Firehose announcement that we had back in December at the web, and then kind of a follow-up to that. Talk through what this innovation and opening of innovation means through some examples of different applications within the ecosystem. And then we want to leave a bunch of time at the end to answer questions, because actually I've never talked in front of a Microsoft crowd, and I don't know what kinds of questions you guys would have that are maybe specific to needs in the Microsoft community. So we're really looking forward
technical.
Yeah, technical, whatever. So feel free to jump in and feel free to jump in front of the mic anytime during the session or raise your hand. This is meant to be more of a discussion than us standing up here for 50 minutes and talking at you. So what is the Twitter platform? So Twitter started 2006, 2007, depending who you're talking to, and between the first code and actually becoming a company. But from almost its inception, it's had an API. And really part of that, the history of it was built on Rails. Rails made it really easy to expose its core functionality as an API. And Alex Payne, who was at the company at the time, took on leading that effort, worked with developers, helped people kind of build this Twitter experience. And apps like Twitterific were kind of born out of that. They took the same exact Twitter experience and put it onto your desktop so you didn't have to come to twitter.com. And I think very early on, the company felt this kind of powerful thing that came out of having these simple and open APIs. Fast forward a little bit to today, that same philosophy of kind of this simple and open approach is still really core to what we do, but the platform has grown a lot. We announced back in December that there's 50,000 applications on there. It's grown a lot since then, but we'll hold off some actual numbers until our Chirp conference in about a month or so. Raf, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of the numbers and science behind it?
So it's about 60% of tweets today come from our API. So we eclipse Twitter.com by I think something like 75%.
It's like 75 or so.
75% of all access to Twitter comes from our API and not from Twitter.com itself. But like what Brian was saying, for ease of use and accessibility, like everything you can do on Twitter.com, we've exposed an API for. Like we've purposely tried to make sure that the API is either at parity or leads the charge a bit on what you can do with the Twitter platform. We have 3 classes of APIs. We have the REST APIs, which is effectively everything you can do on Twitter.com, you can do through REST API. So you can follow someone, unfollow someone, you can do a status update, you can geotag. All those core functionalities that you see on Twitter, you can do through the REST API. We also have a search API, which allows you to get access to our index of all the tweets that come through the system. All the tweets should be caveated. We definitely do some filtering, some relevance matching to make sure that you have the highest quality index that we can. So a lot of the tweets are available through search and through the search API as well. And then the last one, the one that the Firehose and all those other big syndication deals and little syndication deals are built around, is our streaming API. So that one, you literally open a socket to us. You do a long pole HTTP connection. And then we'll stream to you in real time when a tweet comes in. If it matches what you're looking for, we'll stream it out to you within a couple of seconds, depending on the performance of the system. Of a tweet coming in will come right back out to you. So you can get actually access to real-time data that what makes Twitter, you can get access to it that way.
Yeah, and part of our kind of future of where we want to take the platform is up until now we've been very much this kind of mirror of Twitter.com. So like Twitter wants to do retweet, we built a retweet API. Twitter is going to do lists, we do a list API. But kind of the future of where we see our team and kind of the company going is offering these more kind of raw bits into the system that Twitter.com itself can use in one way, but the ecosystem could mash up and work with in many other ways.
I mean, so this came into play when we did the geotagging API, for example. Like that wasn't on Twitter.com originally. Like we only built that as an API feature just to get that out in front of developers before the .com team could catch up to us. Like I guess another way to think about it is that Twitter.com is only one like one vertical experience of what the Twitter ecosystem can do. And what we as a platform team are trying to do is build that foundation so you can start building lots of different ways to slice and dice their data or get better or different user experiences.
Yeah. Do we want to actually switch over to terminal?
We could.
Yeah. All right. Since we know everyone's engineers, I thought this would be a little more fun. So this is kind of one of the beauties of the platform that we always talked about. Oh. Switching over still. Wonder if... Oh, there we
cool.
go. Thought that was a blue I'm changing screen. All right, so one of the beauties of the platform is you could just open up curl, you could poke at one of our endpoints and get data back. And that's been hugely successful and hugely valuable for us in allowing people to kind of get started. We thought it'd be a really good thing to actually show you what it looks like to poke at some of the Firehose endpoints, some of the streaming API endpoints.
Do we have those?
Up. Yeah, there you go.
So this, for example, will connect to our stream. We just have a test account, and it's attached to our what we call spritzer. So it's only giving a sample of all the data that comes through. But once we connect to it, we should start just getting tweets flowing through the system. So it's just a statistical sample of all the tweets that are being created right now are being shoved out this socket.
And this is about 5% of the feed. The actual Firehose is an 8 megabit per second big smack in the face of data, which obviously takes a lot of money and a lot of hardware to actually consume that. So a lot of people say they want the Firehose, but a lot of times these actual sampled feeds are more in line with what you need. If you're trying to do something statistically representative of the whole feed, sometimes these smaller samples are easier to work with.
I mean, some of the questions we get a lot are like, I want to connect to the Firehose because I want to see how many tweets are coming from, blah, blah, blah. And once you immediately start going to the how many, then a sample is perfect for that, right? You can just do a statistical sample and extrapolate that easily.
Another one we talked a little bit about, too, was the search API. Let's see if this will... and the search API can be done in a bunch of different ways, and we can... works better. There's a bunch of different parameters you can pass in, both just keywords, some of it's location. So we thought we'd actually take the location, or sorry, actually let's knock this down a little bit. Location of the convention center, Mandalay Bay, and then search for...
Yeah, kilometers, not meters.
Oh, yeah. There we go. So this will show you all the tweets that have happened around here that are geotagged within a 2-kilometer radius. So we can go back up to the top.
Go for it.
Yeah.
What percentage of tweeters actually enable geocode? It's pretty, you have to opt in.
Yep. So the question for the viewers at home, hopefully there's tons, is what percentage of tweeters have geocoding? So there's 2 different levels of geocoding in our system. There's the profile level geocoding. So it's kind of self-declared. Could be San Francisco, but it could also be, like Rafi said, my mom's basement. So it doesn't have to be something that gets geocoded or is geocodable. But if we can, we take a pass at it, run through a geocoder, and turn it into a location. The search API uses both. And I think we looked at one time, I can't remember the exact size. I want to say it was like 60% of profiles are something that is geocodable. Now, again, that doesn't mean that that's the real time. As you move around, it gets updated. I don't know if we've actually talked about numbers yet around the actual geotagging API, like lat lons that are attached to tweets. It's definitely smaller than that, and it's growing.
Especially with our new GeoPlace API, for example, there's been a decent uptick in the number of people using it because since we allow you to attach not just a coordinate but a place to it, people are getting a lot more comfortable with this notion.
And the thinking behind that originally was, raw lat lon is not for everybody. It's totally precise. We didn't want to have some kind of fuzzing mechanic because that's just bad data. So if we're going to allow for this really precise data, then it should only be people who are really comfortable with that and know all of the risks around it. So we put it in a place that was really kind of transparent and obvious that they're getting into it, and then still kind of made it difficult for them to do it. So we knew and expected it to be smaller amounts, but we wanted to start getting that plumbing into place and start thinking about what that feature would be like. Any other questions around we could poke at the REST API and stuff for a little while, too, if you guys have questions. Do you want to send a status update?
Sure.
Let's see. Nothing like typing on a big screen.
Yeah, I know. You can see how bad the typer actually am. It's amazing I actually get work done. Yeah, so that's just me tweeting, actually just hey ho from this test account. You can see the text right there. And to go, for example, on bad location data, our test location is not very geocodable at all.
Any other stuff from the command line you guys want to see?
Well, like, request.
Sure.
When it comes to the status text,
Yeah.
imagine being a lot of other nodes trying to parse it, find actual information inside. If we actually had parsing services aggregated in one location, so that there's more uniformity in what we can parse, like what do URLs really look like? How do you identify? How does Twitter identify a URL? How does Twitter identify a mention? How does Twitter?
Sure. I mean,
I see.
having
Repeat
an
the question.
Yeah, so the question was, like, can Twitter, and correct me if I'm wrong, provide some kind of API which is a uniform parser so we can actually extract certain terms from it? It's an interesting idea. It's one that we've thought about. We have open sourced all our libraries around parsing tweets. So you can use our libraries. Yeah, so you can use those exact same libraries that we use on Twitter.com anywhere else. Doing it as part of an API is interesting.
But we've talked about having a parallel payload that has the kind of HTML pretty rendered version of it, because a lot of this gets written to the web. But we also don't want to, like, this is kind of sacrosanct for us to leave this as is, and we can't modify the tweet because so much just needs to be rendered on those low-end devices, and we don't want to start throwing in extra data that wasn't part of the original tweet. So we consider the original tweet essentially immutable, but we can add other kind of metadata and other kind of post-processing stuff around it that'll make it easier for people to play with. But then again, we also, as soon as we add a parallel payload, that makes it a 16 megabit per second, connection. So every little incremental change has kind of dramatic effects downstream in a lot of cases.
Yeah, well, maybe not embedded, but again,
Secondary
secondary.
call.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
All right. Cool. So I want to talk a little bit about this announcement from LeWeb. Loic runs LeWeb, so if you're interested in going to France next year, talk to him. Early on in the company, and getting back to this idea of like where the platform is going, we don't want it to be the same thing of like everyone just go recreate Twitter for some other device. Like we want people to know that we don't feel like Twitter.com is like the end all be all for experiences. It's one take. It's very minimalistic, but there's a million different ways to kind of slice it and create that. But in order to do that, we need to start opening up the index so people had availability to it so they could create these different experiences. And at first we did deals with Microsoft, Google, and Yahoo to get access to that full stream of all public tweets. But we were really committed to making sure that everyone in the ecosystem kind of across it's more in line with our approach, that everyone in the ecosystem is kind of treated the same, has the ability to have access to that same index. So we made the announcement in December and actually signed a bunch of deals as of last month. This one was a little track, but so now there's like at least 12 other companies that we announced with that day, or 7 companies I think we announced with that day, that are ranging from like 1 or 2 person shops in Russia to a bunch of local search companies, to real-time search companies. But the idea is to start getting this data out there so people can build their own experiences on top of it and aren't limited to exactly what we've kind of posed at our experience. So with that being said, what does that actually mean? Like, why do we do this openness? We feel that innovation is really core to moving the Twitter experience forward, and you can't really help enable this innovation without this radical openness. And we talk about openness in a bunch of different ways. From the platform side, openness is about ubiquity of content, not so much about policy and stuff like that. Twitter talks about openness in a bunch of other ways, but for the platform, it's really about sharing content. This is a Baker Tweets, which is this little app that this guy, or actually hardware device that this guy built, that hooks into, does it hook into like any oven? I don't know.
I don't know.
Some commercial ovens.
Yeah, probably.
And when the oven is done cooking whatever, it sends out a tweet to say like fresh cookies or whatever. But the idea is that there's a bunch of different, you actually want to talk about botanicals?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few others that people from NYU have built where you put water sensors into your plants and they'll tweet you when they're thirsty, quote unquote. So I think it just really shows that, one, the easiness of which it is to interact with a Twitter API. Like, it doesn't actually require a computer to pull it off. Like, these are embedded 8-bit microprocessors that are talking to our API. But two, it also shows that, like, like what Ryan was saying, the Twitter.com experience is supposed to be very general. It's supposed to be, it encompasses everything that Twitter can do. Whereas we're trying to provide ways to really allow developers to do a deep dive on certain functionality. So like this, they just really want to have a very customized way to do a tweet. Other people may want to have really customized ways to do search or other experiences, customized ways to show your followers or friends.
Cool. So I thought the best way to actually start to go through this is we picked out like 4 or 5 apps that are across the ecosystem and using different experiences on top of it to talk through. So ask questions. We can dive into like how they're using the APIs. We didn't know ahead of time like if we should be showing a bunch of code or not. So we're happy to dive in where you guys have questions. Who here uses or knows about CoTweet? Oh, cool. All right, so that makes it good.
Yeah.
One guy. So CoTweet, 2. All right, oh, there you go, 2. CoTweet is actually one of they've been a great kind of Twitter developer. It started out, I want to say 2 years ago. I don't know actually their exact start time, but probably around then. With guys who were working in another business at the time, they were trying to help their brand or their business find out more about how people are talking about them on Twitter. And they wanted some new features that Twitter.com didn't provide, things like workflow and stuff like that. I'll show you a little bit about that. So they decided to go build it. They started building this prototype for internal use, decided there's actually a real business to be had there. They broke out, started finding some more guys. They were in Philadelphia at the time. Finding some more guys who were interested in this, raised money, moved everyone to San Francisco and their families, started getting customers. I think it's like $1,500 a month to license this, but built a real business on this. Like there was great money being transacted. People were using Twitter in a totally different way. And then they eventually, or I think maybe only a few weeks ago, got acquired by a company called ExactTarget. So in the matter of 2 years, they were able to like build this business, service real customers, help add value to the entire Twitter ecosystem, and then have also a nice, great payday. And now they're within a company that has great resources to help expand that same vision for them. So it's a great story of what we want to see more and more happen on the ecosystem, within the Twitter ecosystem. I thought they'd be a great one to start with. Oh, Facebook, okay. So it's not too different than your main timeline, your normal timeline. The idea here is you hook up a few different accounts, and you start to watch timeline for those people that are talking about you. I think in this case, it's all mentions. So every time, this is for our conference Chirp, every time someone says something about Chirp, we see it show up in here, and we can now see how we want to follow up with them. So the workflow, or the feature that they're trying to showcase is this idea that this could be used as like a customer support channel. So that all this time, people are talking about brands, talking about businesses, talking about products, and there's no real way to use it as a customer support channel, but that's what it was becoming. Like Twitter didn't offer those tools. So they add tools in like you would with any kind of a phone network support to be able to add workflow to each of these. So you can see as you pick a tweet that you want to follow up on, or actually I'll talk through the users first. So multiple users can also be in this. So Rafi and I can run the Chirp account and we can both follow up with people and assign workflow over to someone else so that I know that Rafi knows something a little more about this exact question. You know, Comcast Cares is a great one, right? They use Chirp, or sorry, they use CoTweet. They have a really specific question about someone who's supposed to come to someone's house in Atlanta. They never showed up. They can route that tweet to the right person so that that person can follow up for them, as opposed to them, one person having to have all the knowledge to get this done. So it supports multiple users being able to manage the same account. The idea is you pick a single tweet that you have some interest in following up on. You can assign it to a specific user, add a message to it, and then assign the tweet. And then as you see it in the actual timeline, it says this one's been marked for follow-up. So one person can go through and do all the assigning. Another person comes to their assignment inbox and sees all the tweets that they're meant to be followed up on. So it's a great workflow. They do a lot of API calls.
Yeah, they access the REST API just like everyone else, or like most other people, but they hammer our system.
They hammer. They let us know about outages before we know about them because they're hitting us so often. But this is such a great example, such a kind of canonical example of what we'd love to see more in the ecosystem. Take this very niche approach. There's very specific tool sets that Twitter probably will never be focused on building and focused on that market, and build them to these guys, and they find some great money to be had there because there's a lot of businesses who are wanting to tap into it.
I mean, they also do code tags, right?
Yeah.
So as part of their multiple users managing one account idea, they introduced the notion of putting code tags at the end of every single tweet. So like having a 2-letter initial of the person who actually constructed that tweet. And they're an example of people that we worked with to help make that a fundamental part of Twitter itself. So we have a contributors API that we're slowly rolling out to multiple partners, and they're beta testing it for us so that you can actually properly annotate who created that tweet.
Yep. And then in the timeline, it'll actually say, is it from Rafi?
Yeah, from Rafi.
From Rafi, and you can link to Rafi so you can see the actual identity of the person posting it, even though he's posting through the Chirp account as well. And they've also started to move over to the streaming API. I mean, because they're so focused on kind of real time and needing to know when like new DMs come in, when new app mentions come in, they would literally pound on the API to the point that our servers were crying. Yeah. So they were a great candidate for the streaming API because they're sitting here for a certain set of predicates. They just want to know, they have an event-based system that they want to know when these things come in. So the streaming API right now supports tweets only, but we're moving to a market where it'll support social graph changes, DMs, @replies, profile changes, all that kind of stuff. So everything else you need to go to the REST API for, we'll be able to support over a single stream at some point. Any questions on CoTweet? Cool. Do you want to talk through Cadmus?
It's your favorite app. You should
It is
go
my
for that
favorite.
one.
These guys, there's actually 2 guys in Canada who built this whole thing. This one isn't very different than Twitter in a lot of ways, right? It's just your Twitter stream, a lot of the same functionality, rendering tweets. But it's really subtle, as you notice. But if you look at the timestamps on the right, it's not time ranked, it's not time ordered. What they've done is very much kind of like the Facebook top news feed. They've taken some set period of time, and in this case, it's the last time I checked in. And for me, someone who doesn't really get to check their feed very often, I actually only check maybe once a day. This is such an awesome tool. You check in, or you log in, and you take that last period, say it's a day, and then they re-rank all of your updates or all of your tweets based on kind of what their concept of popularity is. So you'll see in this case, what they call related posts. They do a bunch of semantic analysis across all the different tweets within your timeline to find posts that are also very similar. So they don't have to be exact word matches, but they're very similar. I don't know, actually, they use behind the scenes. But they try and make some great guesses to see like how thematic was this? Like how big of news if a lot of other people are talking about the same thing, even though they might not be like @replying or retweeting that exact specific item, it still can give some signal to value or some signal to importance. And that's something, again, we don't do on Twitter whatsoever. We make this really hard to get at, actually, which is kind of surprising that they do it.
They also do trends within like your follower list, for example. And that's, again, something we do very badly. Actually, don't do at all. So right now, we provide global trends, and we provide some location-based trends through our APIs. So you can find out what's trending in London or what's trending in LA. But what a lot of people have been asking for, and we just don't yet do, is what's trending in my social graph. So like, what are my friends talking about right now? How can I catch up to that conversation? And that's something that Cadmus does pretty well, actually.
They do it within lists now, too. They just added that the other
cool.
week, which is really cool, because I have a hard time even keeping up with my own people that I follow. But within lists, like at South by Southwest, you could all of a sudden see the top tweets that were coming out from people that were speakers at South by Southwest. You could see the top ones from MIX. It's very cool. The other feature that they do really, really well is this concept of conversations. We suck at it. Like
We're basically showing you all the things we suck at and other people do better.
Embrace the suck. So Ev had this keynote at South by Southwest, and afterwards there's a lot of back channel that he wasn't forced to answer any tough questions. So he tweeted out, like, I'm totally open to answering tough questions, like, have at it. So all these people started replying in, throwing questions at him. And if you looked at twitter.com, you would only see Ev's original tweet. And you could maybe hunt and peck around and find other people that had replied him, and you'd see who he replied to. But it makes it very hard to surface that conversation that's so fundamental to kind of the real-time web. And this has been a great way to help kind of aggregate all of that conversation under one thing. It keeps going way down, but it's such a cool thing to see this one kind of top-line post and then everyone else kind of reacting to it and asking questions back. Sure. Yeah, anywhere. This could be through Seismic, it can be through text message, it can be wherever. They aggregate everything back into the single view. Yeah. So when you actually go to post a status update, so status/update, you can post an in reply to status ID. And not every client does it. So if you got this on your mobile phone and you saw, Ev was asking a question, you write back to him, it won't do that linkage. The API needs to actually explicitly state this one is in reply to this status ID. But most every rich client or client that is able to do it supports that functionality now. But that's how we're able to make that linkage behind the scenes.
But there's more that makes a conversation just like linking the in reply to, right? Like there's mentions that might come up like temporally and stuff like that. And it's something that we just don't expose through the API at all right now. Like you can pull your mentions timeline, but you'll have to do something smart and try and merge those together and try and make some educated guess. And that's what they're doing, and they're doing it pretty well.
Any other questions about Cadmus? There's also, I just love the fact that it was like two guys hacking on an app that they really loved, and I don't remember how I found it the first time, but I've been a big supporter of it because I think they've done a great job thinking out of the box on what we think of as a Twitter experience doesn't mean that that's what we prescribe to everyone else. We actually would love to see people kind of riff more on like discovery and discovery of users, discovery of content.
Yeah, discovery content's a big one for us, right? Like because like a lot of people just create user interfaces around our timeline methods, for example. So you just basically see the Twitter.com experience in lots of different clients. And we get really excited internally when we see someone who's sort of taking a completely different approach to presenting and helping people consume our data.
Cool. You want to talk Trends Map?
Sure. So Trends Map is one that I like a lot because what they do is they try to figure out what's trending information all across the world. So right now at Twitter, we have a few different ways to get trending information. You can see what's trending right now. You can see what's trending in the last day and see what's trending in the last week. And then you can also see what's trending right now in a bunch of different locations. At some point, we'll clean this up a bit so you can also see what was trending in the last week in London, for example. We just haven't gotten there yet. But what TrendsMap did, and this was actually predates, I think, most of our our location-based trending API, is that they just would hit the search API for a lot of different locations all around the world, just continuously hit it at what our rate limits allowed.
Sometimes over.
Sometimes over. There's a little nervousness going on whenever we hear someone do this. But then they just sort of aggregate what are constant trends that are showing up from different places all over the world and plot it. And it comes out to be a gorgeous visualization, and you can really understand what people in different places are talking about. Like, you can't see it here, but like being able to see what people up and down the West Coast are talking about when you zoom in on a sort of like granularity level is actually really fascinating to me.
It's cool to even see Austin and South by Southwest being talked about near New York, I think it is. It's hard to see in it, but it's not just about what's happening in the area. A lot of times it's what people care about, and they're tweeting from that specific location. Also, could actually be a bunch of people traveled there, but
that's right.
South by Southwest is all over, actually. And to see what this actually looks like, and this goes back a little bit to that post I did earlier, but it's really just a simple pass in a geocode and pass in a radius, and we'll give you back those tweets.
So they just did this for a bunch of different, like I think the top, I don't remember how many top cities in the US, and just got all their latitudes, longitudes, and just started hitting the search API.
Yeah. So if you actually zoom out on the world, you'll see the areas that they don't query around. But this is just a really creative use of using that same search technology with no specific parameter, no specific query into it, just to let people go discover content that could be interesting to them. This was just the specific Las Vegas one. They keep adding new views all the time, too, which is kind of cool. But if you actually zoom in and you don't want to look at it in kind of this map-based way, they give you this other way to look at the stream of tweets that are going by, and if you watch it, it happens in real time. But they also pull out links that are trending in that area. Across the top is a graph about things that are going.
I also like the fact that they're showing the tweet volume on day. You can see our like ebbs and flows through the system.
So these guys are just great data guys. This is one I pulled up too. So if you actually zoom in on Vegas, you'll see MIX10 trending in there. And you can pull up secondary view that actually shows both globally and locally the spark lines for how big those terms are. And then that kind of same flow of tweets rolling through there. So again, discovery is something that we, because of our asymmetrical follow graph, like you don't have to be friends with someone to read their content. We try and leverage that in as many ways as possible by pushing this content discovery and meeting random people who are in the area also talking about Mix. It's a great value for Twitter, and we love to see more and more apps kind of doing that stuff. Hoping you found new people. Any other questions on TrendsMap? They're also actually the same guys that do Bug Me Not and Retail Me Not.
Oh, I never knew that.
Yeah, based in Australia. Seismic Look.
We should have them come up.
Yeah, we're going to go talk about your application. Tell us if we're wrong about anything. So Seismic has been a great partner because how many apps do you guys have now? 8 Twitter applications, which is awesome. Focused on different modes, different types of devices, different types of use. And one that we found really, really interesting was this one called Seismic Look that was targeted more so at the non-logged in users. So if you're logged into Twitter and you're already a Twitter user, you kind of understand it. But what we've struggled really badly at, or what we've struggled at, is getting new users on board and getting them to understand the value of Twitter without having to sign up. And because of the kind of public by default content, that's something we can do. We can start to show them content that can get them into the system and start understanding how to use it. Seismic is this great. The Seismic Look is this great app that, in some parts, looks very similar to my same kind of Twitter experience. Like, these are just my tweets. Not a ton different here. It's a lot prettier. But it's the exact same kind of experience in some cases. But what they really focused on, and I have a great screenshot of it, is the logged out experience. So opening up the application, you can either set certain terms or set in interest areas and have those tweets just kind of roll by. So they help us really push the discovery of new content. And it's an app that we're really excited about. I think the second one is, yeah, so based on interest, right? Like, they've gone through and cataloged. How did you guys actually catalog? Manual. Oh, manual? Wow. So they've gone through and cataloged all these different accounts based on different categories. So if you're interested in news, NPR, is that Newsweek? Yeah. Start to roll by, so you can start to like hunt and peck for things that you're interested in, as opposed to having to go find specific users that you want to hear from. And really, we do talk a lot internally about like Twitter is this way to digitize interests as opposed to like digitizing relationships that you already have in the real world. So I might be interested in Newsweek and what NPR have to say. We don't have to obviously have a relationship in the real world.
This is similar to our suggested user list API, right? Yeah. So like right now we do expose a way for you to like find sports people that you might want to follow. But still, it doesn't focus on the logged out experience of just being able to consume raw amount of data. It still assumes that you're a Twitter user and you understand what I just said when I said suggested user list.
Any questions on Seismic? We can get Loic up here to talk to you if you have real questions. Cool. So that's all we really had for content to try and like set the conversation, but we'd love to hear from you what questions you guys have. Feel free to step up to the mics. It doesn't even have to be about the specific content. We're happy to. Come on, something.
So one question I had is...
Oh, sorry, introduce yourself too, because it's being recorded.
I'm Grant, and I have a software company called Spry Hive Industries. We do consumer software. And one of the questions I had was the idea that I noticed robots are using the system, that there are apps using the system, yet you're all jammed into the same public channel. And it might be more interesting if we could create a subscription model for channels that, maybe it's a globally unique identifier of some kind, that when you join that, you just get that traffic for your app. So I want to do encryption. I don't want to just spam the public channel, so I'll do public key encryption, so you'll see a bunch of hex go by or something,
So what's what is the question around? So like, how do we separate out content?
Are you guys thinking about those scenarios? I guess that would be the.
So the data's there at least on an app by app basis, right? Like in each tweet, you see the source. So Seismic, Tweety, whatever. The source is there. We don't do a good way of suppressing it on a per app basis.
Yeah,
but I know guys like Brizzly are starting to experiment with that, and I think there's a lot of other apps that are.
Yeah, I can filter on app too. I'm just more interested in not spamming the search engine with traffic that really isn't necessarily even searchable.
Well, and that's where I think search has started to diverge a little bit. Search used to be like, put in a word, we will send you every single tweet that matches that word. But as the system gets bigger and bigger and noisier, like that doesn't provide a great search experience. Like you just end up seeing tons of retweets of the same thing. You see people trying to spam in. So there's been a shift within search to move away from like fullness and full fidelity to better relevancy. So Search API has changed a lot. People used to use it, and TrendsMap was one of them, to index us. So they would just like sit there and geocode all over, and they'd get every single tweet in that area if they could, make fast enough queries. That's not true anymore. Like we're going to start making those payloads more concise and more focused on relevancy. So that's where the streaming API comes in. The streaming API is the full index. So if that's the kind of stuff you want to do on a full index level, use the streaming API. So I guess to the original question, something that we don't have on our roadmap to make things less noisy, but I wouldn't be concerned about creating those feeds because if someone finds it valuable, they'll search for it. And if no one else is finding it valuable, it's not going to find up in search unless you search for something very specific that would match it.
Follow up to your question.
So,
Like,
the,
for example, can I build in my client something that uses Twitter status updates to communicate information between only users of my application? Like, that's encrypted, decrypted, like encoding small images and they can tweet.
No, it's a binary transfer.
so the question is, can we write something that just goes message busting between two endpoints and it's not valuable elsewhere? There's definitely no policy around it. That's obviously not the intention. We think of things as human to human or like machine to human. It should be consumable by an end user, but that doesn't stop it. I think there's actually been a bunch of people who have used it for sending messages down to automated systems like robots they're hacking on. And people do use it for message busting, but it's definitely not the intention, and that's not where the features are going to be built around.
Not something that you would say is a reason for you to like block an application if it's doing that.
Oh, no. I mean,
I don't think so.
Yeah, there's no policy currently against that. I don't know how many users would use it, but,
Not sure we'd recommend it.
yeah. Yeah.
Aaron, Chris Pendleton from Bing. Question about social networks in general. How does Twitter view other companies like Foursquare, like Facebook? Are these partnerships? Are these competition? How do you see these social networks all coming together, and even potentially Google Buzzed? Like, how do you see all these different networks coming together? Because at some point it seems like there's an aggregation of just the different tweets coming together with these different software programs. At some point, the end user is going to want all of these one things into one place as well.
Yep.
So how does Twitter view themselves in that social ecosystem across the industries?
So, good question. I guess you're in the mic, so I need to repeat it. But so there's a few. I see two different sides. That one is like the people who are pushing content into the system, like Foursquare, right? They're helping just be a content creator. They're pushing new things in, and in that case, we want to be this kind of broadcast channel, this a way to amplify your message and get it out there to more people. On the other side of that are kind of more aggregators, like Buzz. For us, it's really about what the users want. Like, it's about user value. And if users want to sit in Buzz and consume the tweets and can interact with the tweets in the same way they can on Seismic, like that's great. There's another channel for them to help do discovery. I think there's enough of a world out there that we can all kind of exist, and there's different modes and different ways of doing that content. So I don't think we view it as competitive as long as the content is flowing to these other networks and maintaining all the right bits along with it. We have some basic display guidelines, like you can't mute the tweet. We want you to take the actions along with the tweet, like all that kind of stuff that exists. So again, we care that users are getting value out of it, and that's what's most important to us.
Thanks.
Garrett from Icometric Software. I'm using the streaming API for a project I'm working on, and just wondering if you have any best practices for filtering that out and getting the best quality. Like, if there's sometimes I get some spam come through. Is there any like right now? A lot of times I take the tweet and figure out how good it is based on how many daily average tweets this user has typically posts. So if they're posting 100 tweets a day, I filter it out.
Yeah.
Is there things like that you can recommend?
So
I mean, I think those are the type of things that we would recommend, like trying to figure out how engaged a user is, or if they're engaged the way that you want them to be engaged for your data. Like the filters on the Stream API are purposefully really simple. It's just filtering on a word or filtering on location in some cases, and then like our guidelines would just be just that. Like you might have to do a secondary pre-process stage, like make sure the text actually matches what you want, and then you might have to requery the REST API to figure out if the user is the kind of user you're interested in. But besides that, I think most of our guidelines we've just put on our wiki, but I think I've just said them.
So the other big one too is I look into other services that handle reputation. There's one called Klout, Klout, and they spend all their time finding users and trying to determine some like 0 to 100, I think it's 0 to 50, maybe rank score of what their reputation is. And there's a few other guys like that, but you could tap into something like that, not have to do the heavy lifting on your own, because it is a very specific set of like practices and post-processing that you need to do that really tap into the social graph aspect of it. And unless you're excited about crawling the social graph part of it, I wouldn't go down that path because it gets pretty deep. But it's great. There's a ton of other guys that's their focus on it, and go tap into them, and that'd be a great way to do it.
I tried a Bayesian network.
Yeah.
It didn't work.
And admittedly so, the social graph stuff on our side has been really difficult. because it was in the same flow of like, okay, I viewed 10 people, view 10 more, view 10 more. And we're slowly starting to kind of open that up more a bit. So Rafi launched a bulk user show this last week, which allows you, so you can do friends IDs and get, I don't know, how many can you get out of that, 8,000 or?
15,000.
15,000 IDs. And then you can pass it in, I don't even know what the policies are around, where we ended up with actual counts.
I think it's 15,000, and for like usernames and IDs.
On the bulk user show, how many do we allow you to get back at a time?
Hopefully by tomorrow it'll be 100 at a time.
Okay. So you can pass in these IDs and get back objects a little easier.
Cool.
Used to be single iterations, which is tough.
Another small question, just more around the business of Twitter. Are you worried that there's so many competitors now just using your own API? Is there any worry that Twitter won't be able to monetize their own product after a while if people start using these other services rather than Twitter.com?
So, fundamentally, no. I mean, we're really excited about the fact that not all, I should say, a lot of the traffic happens offsite. Most of the traffic happens offsite. Obviously, as a business, we need to put the structure in place to make sure that we can capture value back from that. And I think you'll see as we start to roll out the ad stuff that we want more people to be involved in that. And really, it's probably more beneficial to a lot of the ecosystem players that they have a way to monetize without having to go and build their own ad platform, go out to guys who don't have great inventory. So we're really excited to get that out there into the ecosystem. And it's, from our approach, like this is an ecosystem first thing.
Yeah.
Twitter.com happens to be part of it as well. But it's core to our success that the ecosystem becomes healthy and successful. And so yeah, we're excited about it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It's an interesting way of saying it, that Twitter.com is just one thing. It's part of our ecosystem.
Yeah.
Hi, Karsten Januszewski with MIX10. So a couple questions. First one, I was wondering if you could speak to your OAuth implementation and the idea of using Twitter as an identity provider. I know you guys want, if I want my app to authenticate with you, that's one thing. But what do you think about the idea of actually being almost like Facebook Connect-like and using Twitter as an identity provider? Is that something you encourage, discourage? Is anybody doing it?
So we've had OAuth for all over a year now in different stages of it. The current implementation is OAuth 1.0a. And there's been a lot of guys, we had this kind of sign in with Twitter program for a long time where you could use OAuth to both authorize or authenticate and get back the tokens to be able to validate a user. So you could do it as an identity program. Ev announced at the keynote on Monday that we're going to be making a much bigger play in that space around this product called @Anywhere that allows, it's essentially another abstraction of those into JavaScript that allow people to more easily tap into things like identity, following actions, different actions that kind of get percolated up into sites. But identity is a big part of that for sure. I think the part we're most excited about is people, I think, view Twitter as this way to have multiple accounts. Like I have different public identities. I have some within the team. I have my RServer account, but there's a lot of people that use these different identities. And because we're public by default, I think that maps really well to people wanting to share their identity on a lot of these sites. So we're really excited about it. Yeah.
Okay. Huh. Yeah, I didn't know about that announcement, so it sounds like it should go.
Cool. Yeah, we have, not to plug one developer conference, another one,
Yeah.
but we have our big developer conference coming up on April 14th and 15th in San Francisco. And we'll be pulling out a lot more details about @Anywhere and a lot of this other stuff there.
Cool. Then my second question, so you're talking about the difference between the search API versus the streaming
Sure.
API. So let's take a scenario that I want to do brand management. So I actually really do care about any time that Tide gets mentioned.
Yeah.
So in that case, it sounds like I'm going to want to use the streaming API if I want every single piece of data. And now, so that, let's say, maybe this is on your wiki, but I'll just ask it now.
Yeah.
So what is the, so I can set up a filter on the streaming API. Now, how many streams can I get at? So can I have I want to follow Tide and I want to follow Coca-Cola and I want to follow this? How does that work? I get how it works in the search API, but I don't quite get how that would work in the streaming API.
I mean, you set up a bunch of parameters, I think we call them track parameters. And you set up just comment the limited list of track parameters that you want to be watching. Our search API, for example, uses rate limits on the number of times you can actually hit the API per second. Whereas on streaming API, the limits are the number of parameters you can be tracking in real time per connection you have open. Yeah. Although you're only supposed to have one connection open to us. So yeah, you just set up a bunch of these track parameters on it, and you'll be able to, and we'll just deliver to you anything that trivially matches that. So you will have to do some filtering on your side because we don't check if it's a substring match or a full string match, or we don't look for delimiters on white space because of internationalization issues, but it'll give you everything.
Okay. And what is that? How many parameters can you pass then?
I don't remember.
Does that look right? There's different levels of it.
Yeah.
I think at a base level, you can pass in 200 without ever authenticating yourself with us. And then we can kind of graduate you up to like 500,000 if you need to.
Oh, really?
But we get into like commercial licenses at that level. Is that that'd be right?
No.
No. Okay.
I don't remember exactly how to phrase it.
All right, we can look it up. No, anyway.
And is that then I get so if you do that, you're not going against the stream that's the spritzer, which is like a
No, so the
So
spritzer
this
is just a like connect to it for entertainment purposes, and we'll give you a sample of all our tweets.
Right.
This one, we will deliver you any tweet that matches.
So one is like, sample JSON, and the other one's filter JSON, and then you pass in a parameter for filter. I think it's track. Or you can also do follow equal to, and then you can pass in Rafi, comma, our server, comma, Loic. So you can get all the tweets from those users in the same way you can get keywords.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Joe Stagner from Microsoft. Is there a mechanism for historic searching?
There, if you consider 2 weeks historic, yes. Currently, our search index only makes about like a week to 2 weeks, and that's really just based on hardware capacity over time. So we have them all still there, and they will be available at some point. But it really has just been an issue of hardware capacity.
Okay, so if you really want to do trend analysis over more than 2 weeks worth of time, you've got to capture the stream.
So that's why we tell most people, if you're thinking about doing it, like start gathering data now. We tell people to cache frequently, cache often, store the data. We don't have policies necessarily around like how long you can store the data. So start capturing it now and put it in a place where you can start to do post-processing later. You can go back on users' timelines to 3,200 tweets. So if there's a certain set of people, there's like Backupify and a few services where you OAuth in with or OAuth to the service. They go grab all of your tweets and they start to back them up for you, so you can get access to them at any time. And then they give you month by year ways to go back in the archives.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else?
One other one.
Sure.
Yeah.
What other projects out there that you guys have seen that do good data visualization?
So there's a whole space around like sentiment analysis. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
And just cool data visualization in general, whether it's sentiment or word clouds or whatever it might be.
Yeah, Radiant 6 is probably one of the big ones. Scout Labs, they do a lot of the like brand dashboard stuff, and they do some really serious back-end work. There's different levels of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, the sentiment, like visualizations can either apply as a very broad thing, or you're looking for a very niche thing. I think one of my favorite ones is the I Just Landed app or something like that.
Yeah.
Where someone just monitors the entire tweet stream for like people saying, I just took off and I just landed. And then you see like this gorgeous visualization.
Yeah, you see it's like processing that they use, and they show like the arc of the flight from where they originally reported to where they land. That one's really cool. Stamen Design, probably a small shop. They do more custom work, but they did the visualization for the Olympics. So you'd see this tracker over time of all the different tweets coming out from people, and they would show these, what are those called, the box graph?
Grid map. Or
something like
tree
that.
map.
Tree map, I think. Of what stories were big at the time, and you could click into it to see all the tweets that are going on. There's a spark line at the bottom.
Did they also do the VMAs?
They did VMAs as well. The Video Music Awards from MTV. They showed on air like these bubbles of the people that were being talked about in relation to each other. And like when Kanye happened in real time, you'd see like his thing explode and all the other ones get pushed out. And then as Taylor Swift came on, her thing got bigger. So there's a lot of guys that are playing with it. There's no like libraries that I've seen that are like make it really easy. But there's a ton of guys playing with the data, and it's really cool. Any other questions? All right. Cool. Thank you guys for coming and joining us, and feel free to reach out to us or stop by. Thank you.
Thank you.